As it is with every other game in the Zelda franchise, there was a lot of care and love put into Echoes of Wisdom. Satoshi Terada, the director of The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom from Grezzo, Tomomi Sano, the director from Nintendo's side, and Eiji Aonuma, the producer of the Legend of Zelda series, recently sat down to give exclusive behind-the-scenes details about the development of Echoes of Wisdom. And there's a lot of interesting facets in here, such as what could have been a Zelda Dungeon Maker, and how Echoes of Wisdom potentially fits in the larger picture of the Legend of Zelda series. So let's go through some of the details and learn a thing or two about the Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. Tomomi Sano was the first female director for a game in the Legend of Zelda series. She has worked on both Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask 3D for the 3DS, Twilight Princess HD for the Wii U, and of course the Link's Awakening remake. Aonuma stated that if Grezzo is involved in a project, he almost always ensures that she is engaged in it. Aonuma mentions that it's his desire that the 2D top-down Zelda games would be separate from the 3D entries like Breath of the Wild. And I think that has some timeline and lore implications that the 2D games aren't going to be treated like the 3D in terms of their history and how they all connect, so I think we should really be viewing this game as more of a miniature garden, a tiny sandbox experience compared to other games in the past. It's implied that Grezzo's staff had a big hand in determining what the foundation of Echoes of Wisdom would be. Everyone on the team submitted ideas, and after reviewing the entries, it was decided to proceed with a copy and paste gameplay style. So essentially the gameplay for The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom was born from the idea of Aonuma states that he feels Zelda fans wouldn't continue to play Zelda games if they weren't challenged to think independently and create solutions to puzzles rather than following a set path. Later in the interview, he says, "Having the freedom to solve puzzles by yourself is a key feature of Legend of Zelda games." So that's Aonuma kind of clearly giving his stamp on what he thinks part of the Zelda formula is today. Now this part is really interesting. The interview goes on to say, "The game was designed as a dungeon maker during the exploration phase, but after Aonuma demoed the game, he provided feedback which pushed the game in the direction of using what we now know as echoes. The Dungeon Maker version of the game had about a year's worth of development under its belt before the direction was changed. As it turns out, Grezzo pitched the idea of a Dungeon Maker to Nintendo immediately after completing Link's Awakening because they liked the Link's Awakening remake so much. They even teased the Dungeon Maker ability in Link's Awakening." Aonuma shared his concern about the Switch's ability to handle too many echoes, but he was amazed at how many echoes it was possible to create. Now this is an interesting caveat because we all know that the Switch has hardware limitations and that's why the Switch 2 is coming around the corner. But my guess is they had to put a cap on how many echoes you could create in the game just for memory's sake, and it's my guess that this is how the tri-piece mechanic came into play. See, Tri has these tri-pieces or these triangles that float behind it, and according to the trailers it seems like the more tri-pieces there are, the more echoes that we can create. But this inherently creates a limit on how many echoes we can use, and it also creates some interesting gameplay dynamics. It was a focus during the development to ensure that echoes gathered in the top-down perspective can still be used in a side-view perspective, and they will function in new ways. As for the number of echoes, the team developed over 100 echoes for us to use in the game. The team acknowledged that Zelda doesn't have a way to attack directly initially. At first, it was possible to let out echoes that did the work for you, but that incurred too much waiting, so the team fixed that to make gameplay more exciting. The team thought about limiting the number of echoes to 20 in a dungeon to prevent the game-breaking mechanics. Restrictions such as this were scrapped because it would have been frustrating to not be able to use a solution in a dungeon that worked out in the overworld. Aonuma discusses the theory that being let loose from restraints gives a sense of feeling and growth. That's why old games were designed to slowly lift the restrictions that were there from the start. However, the Echoes gameplay flied in the face of that theory, and it was more fun not having those restrictions at all. Many restrictions that were in place during development initially were removed. The development team had a key phrase being mischievous. For example, if you rolled something like a spike roller, it's a lot of work to deal with the physics of that because of all the things it could hit. Being mischievous meant removing that possibility. There were 3 rules during development. Number 1. Be able to paste things however, whenever, and wherever. Number 2. Make it possible to complete puzzles using things that aren't there. And number 3. Being able to find uses for echoes that are so ingenious it almost feels like cheating should be a part of what makes this game fun. And this is a similar development mentality that the team took towards The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. An example cited was the Miyamagana Shrine for Breath of the Wild. You had this maze-laden platform that you had to navigate a ball through and flip it into the goal. but you could just flip the platform over on its backside. You had this completely flat surface, obstacle-free, and you could just roll the ball into the goal. Link was slated to be the original protagonist of this game, but having a sword and shield did not mix with this new copy-and-paste gameplay style. They had the idea that you get this sword and shield later, and implemented it as sword fighter mode later. Aonuma acknowledged that fans had been asking for a Zelda game, and thought this was the perfect fit. The team toiled over her outfit, wanting to go with more of an adventure-ready look, and thus landed on her giving Link's hood. The hood represents the hero who had become strong after many adventures. Now I think it's interesting to note that they specifically used the phrase, the hero who has become strong after many adventures. So, while they may not give too much consideration to the timeline, and that does appear later in this video and in the interview, I do wonder if this is a Link that we've seen before. The reason Zelda goes out on her adventure is specifically because Link disappears into the still world. Aonuma states that Zelda is royalty, and thus they carefully crafted a storyline where it made sense for her to go on the adventure rather than rely on the people around her who can fight. The rifts were also created as a motivation for Zelda to personally rescue Link and her father, the King of Hyrule. Rifts can appear anywhere, the ground, on buildings, water, lava, etc. The rifts could change based on level design, and rifts can appear or disappear based on your progression through the story. If you're enjoying these Zelda facts and learning more about the behind-the-scenes development of Echoes of Wisdom, subscribe to the channel because I'll be sure to cover more of Echoes of Wisdom as I dive through the game, and of course I'll be giving my review on it once I've completed it. Alright, now this is the part that I think is going to be the most interesting for people who care about the timeline and Zelda lore and all those sorts of things. The team considered how much lore to add or change that impacted Hyrule's history. Grezzo set up Zelda lore boot camps of sorts to help with this. As it turns out, the story was scripted in just a day. After discussing the lore and ideas that the Grezzo team had for the story, Eiji Aonuma ran back to his hotel and scripted the game's story in a night, and then various elements that often occur in Zelda games were added as time went on. This is how the game's story came to be. Leading up to that one-day script, about 9 days was spent at these boot camps coming up with story ideas. Aonuma acknowledges the fans' reactions when it comes to the game's lore, and states that it becomes increasingly narrow if you try to continue to build upon the lore of previous games. Aonuma states that this game's plot is not in line with the other games, where Link is the protagonist. Quote, "We realize that even if the developers didn't intend to make nonsensical changes, players could interpret otherwise. There are no intentions of establishing any new theories in the series lore with this entry. The story takes on a different perspective, being Zelda's perspective. Dungeons and boss fights are reminiscent of traditional Zelda titles in this game, in an effort to provide an authentic Legend of Zelda-like experience. The map of Echoes of Wisdom is 8 times larger than that of Link's Awakening. It started out as 4 times larger, but they continued to add and add until it became what it is today. Terada laughs at the idea that since beds can be used to restore health, some players may opt for sleeping away a boss fight while their echoes handle the actual fighting. So, turns out that is possible. There won't be pots with hearts outside the boss room or inside the boss room like Zelda fans are used to in traditional Zelda titles. Aonuma gives a clever strategy that he came up with for dealing with bosses on his 8th playthrough of the game, but I'll actually omit that from this video because I don't want to provide techniques for players who want to explore and discover that naturally. So, the interview is linked in the description below, so if you're curious about that, check out part 4 of the interview. Most of the game was developed without any sound implemented. Aonuma credits this lack of sound that increased the Zelda-like feeling. It wasn't until mass production of data and movement towards the final product that the sound team delivered the main theme song of the game. The sound team composed the music to fit the scenes of the game. So the game had mostly already been developed, and then the sound team came in and then created the sounds and music to fit the environment that was already in place. So that was all of the interesting notes and development behind the scenes facts that we got from the interview published by Nintendo. If you're excited for Echoes of Wisdom, please make sure to let me know down in the comments, like the video if you learned something, and we'll see you in the next Echoes of Wisdom video. A huge shout out to my channel members, Rainbow Love, Marcus Podol, and Jbug, who help make these videos possible. If you're interested in becoming a member of Chat Nation, hit the join button below where you'll get access to a monthly members only video, members only emotes that you can access during the stream, and I also have a members only channel in my Discord. And until then, let's continue the conversation, Chat Nation.